Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and a little bit of entertainment. We may well be into the home straight of 2024 at this stage of the year, but there is plenty of more brilliant racing to come before this year wraps up. Excitement is building to the Vinfast IRONMAN 70.3 World Championship in Taupo, New Zealand in December, which really won't be that long coming around, and this will be my last event of the year, and I can't wait to see how the racing unfolds. And speaking of racing, wasn't Kona simply amazing? Race day was spectacular, with Patrick Lange being crowned the Ironman World Champion for the third time in a thrilling display of confidence, patience, grit and determination. His finish line celebration was overflowing with joy and emotion. It was hard not to get swept up in the electric buzz that his finish created when he broke the tape on Ali'i Drive last month. And that buzz on the finish line did not stop from once it started. The party and athlete celebrations continued right through to the early hours of Sunday morning Hawaii time, with almost 2,400 athletes enjoying their own World Championship personal victories, making their way down the most iconic and infamous Ironman finish line in the world. Away from the racing, it was a busy but fun week of announcing and events. The highlight for me personally was hosting the Athlete Ambassador panel, featuring some of the most incredible people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Billy Monger, Jeff and Johnny Agar, Dave McGilvray, Jonathan Pasquale and Bo Jones were the guests. And it was one of the most inspiring groups of people I have ever had the privilege of chatting with. If you are in need of some serious motivation and indeed some self-belief, then you should tune into this interview, which was recorded and is available on the Ironman YouTube channel. You can find the link on my socials or pop me a message and I will send the link to you. It is so worth a listen. Of course, away from the hustle and bustle of working the microphone in Kona, I was delighted with myself to get plenty of running in the legs across the week. I didn't think I would, but I did. Now, I didn't manage to get out for a proper swim to the coffee boat this time around, but to be fair, all the running was a bonus and I really found my stride with running again, pardon the pun. However, last week was a different story altogether. The jet lag and fatigue really hit me when I got back to Galway. Now, I know it may not have been the smartest idea to go straight into hosting a conference and a full-on weekend of competition with Gymnastics Ireland the weekend after Kona. I'll know better for the future. But I slept lots last week. I did very little training and even less work, if I'm honest. It's back to normality this week and also back on track with some training after a great interval session with Galway Tri Club on Saturday morning rejigged my mojo. This coming weekend, I'm excited to once again host the annual Triathlon Ireland Awards. It's going to be a super evening of celebration for our triathlon community in Ireland. And I can tell you now, my dancing shoes are already packed in my bag. As we head quickly into the festive season, the annual Try Talking Sport #FitForChristmas challenge is currently loading. This free and fun challenge encourages people to commit to completing some form of physical activity daily through festive themed movement challenges across the entire month of December. So whether you are already getting your training completed like a boss or maybe need a nudge to get you off the couch on those winter evenings, why not come and join us for the fun of it? And with lots of prizes to be won for simply taking part, it's a win-win for everyone. Pop over to the Try Talking Sport website to find out more and get yourself signed up to get moving in December. And if you really need a nudge to get moving in the coming weeks, come and join the weekly Team RWB Zwift Spins on a Monday evening at 7:05 p.m, hosted by Oliver Harkin of Primed Triathlon Coaching and myself when I turn up. I haven't actually made it back to Zwift just yet after the summer break, but I promise I will be back. And speaking of Christmas, be sure to pop over to Nuasan to pick up some treats for yourself or for someone else this festive period. Individually, the products are amazing and they are perfect for stocking fillers, and the gift sets are a super gift for under the Christmas tree. Use the code TTS15 to get 15% discount on www.nuasan.com. Also, a cheeky plug for the very limited supply of Try Talking Sport bobble hats that we now have available for purchase, which are also a perfect gift to keep your head warm pre or post training during the cooler winter days and nights ahead. Pop on over to the website trytalkingsport.com to check them out and get yours ordered and delivered in time for Christmas. Now, Let's dive right into this captivating episode of the podcast with Laura Philipp, who in September of this year in Nice was crowned the 2024 Vinfast IRONMAN World Champion. Her rise to the top step of the World Championship podium has seen her achieve so much success in a sport that was never even on her radar for many years. In fact, she only learned how to swim when she was 24, something that has certainly not held her back from becoming a world-class triathlete and one of the sport's most successful athletes. Her professional career took off after taking victory at Ironman 70.3 in Mallorca in 2016, and since then Laura has consistently climbed the ranks, collecting titles and podium finishes around the world. She is a multiple Ironman and Ironman 70.3 champion. She's the 2022 Ironman European Champion, the 2023 Ironman Africa Champion and Ironman 70.3 European Champion. She finished in third place in Kona last year, and this year she achieved her dream of finally becoming the Ironman World Champion. Laura shares lots of insight in this episode about many aspects of her life as an athlete, from the importance of aligning her training to her menstrual cycle, to balancing her fueling needs as a vegetarian with the demands of her training and her racing schedule. With her number one supporter, her husband Philip, by her side every step of the way, taking on multiple roles as husband, coach, business partner, even bike mechanic to name a few, she shares some snippets into their life together, chasing goals, and the importance of maintaining a healthy balance between professional and personal life. Laura's happiness is infectious. She believes a happy athlete is a fast athlete. Her enjoyment of a piece of cake every day important in ensuring she gets the balance right in life, even at the highest level of sporting success. Her train smart, have fun and kick-ass mantra is one that we could all benefit from embracing as we each strive to pursue our own ambitions in sport and in life. This episode is packed with fun and laughter, motivation and actionable insights for athletes and fans alike. And whilst we don't go into the nitty-gritty of her World Championship victory in Nice, we do get to know Laura on a personal level and discover just some of the formula of what it takes to become an Ironman World Champion. Now go grab a cuppa and enjoy the show. Laura Philipp, welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast. I am so excited to have you on the show. Now, it has taken us a little while to get here, but as we said in Nice, it was going to be worth the wait. So firstly, congratulations, Ironman World Champion. Has it sunk in yet?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I was really looking forward to this chat. And, you've been the woman who called me Ironman World Champion at the finish line. So I think there will always be like this special memory and connection between the two of us. I still remember, Paul Kay called me "You are an Ironman" for the first time when I did my first Ironman in Barcelona. And I was really looking forward to hear those words for the first time. And this has been back in 2018. And yeah, what a journey it has been. And yeah, to crown myself the Ironman World Champion this year was definitely something I really dreamed of. But yeah, also you never know if you will actually achieve it. So I'm so thankful. Yeah.
Oh, and it was just so cool to call you down the finish line. Like the crowds were immense. The atmosphere was amazing. And to see your emotion on the finish line after such an epic battle and day of racing, it was just, I'm getting goosebumps now. It was just magical. And it was such a privilege to be the person to call you down the finish line. And I suppose it's something, that I'll never take for granted, that I had the opportunity to be the person to call you a world champion. So how has life been, Laura, since the World Championship? I know you raced at the T100 in Vegas, but what's life been like? Has it been a roller coaster? Have you even taken a deep breath and sat down yet?
Yeah, I was quite busy, obviously in a positive way. There has been so much response from people. I was really overwhelmed by, how many people actually said they had tears in their eyes when they watched me cross that finish line. And the support has just been amazing. And I think this is an experience of a lifetime. I think probably if I would have not been in the sport, this is something you probably don't experience in any other area of your life, that so many people root for you, cheer for you, really support you. So that was really special and overwhelming. And then also, of course, like the media interest increased and I did a lot of talking, a lot of interviews. Also, thankfully, the German TV is quite interested in long distance triathlon as well. So there have just been like many really great opportunities, to represent the sport, to represent myself and my team. And yeah, I tried to soak everything in, and there hasn't been much time for training, to be honest. So it was more like a lot of celebrating, doing like obligations, giving also back a little bit, to media, but also to my partners. And then T100 Las Vegas came around quite quick. And that was definitely a bit of a shock to the system. I signed the contract with TA100 in the beginning of the year because I really want to support like the series. And I think it's great for our sport to see new races coming up. And yeah, but definitely from a fitness perspective and also maybe from the mental side, I wasn't really ready to race again. I really feel like the physical fatigue after an Ironman, and especially after such an achievement, is quite high. But the mental fatigue also kicked in. So I really felt like I did a few panic training sessions leading into, because I know that the level is so high. You can't just go there and expect to have a good race. And I didn't really have a good race, but it was still good to be there. Every racing opportunity teaches you something. And the people out on course, they were actually so sweet, because I think I got cheered on so much. They were always like, "You're the world champ, you're the world champ, go champ." And I was like feeling so bad on the day and was so far back in the race that it felt a bit weird. But then on the other side, it was really fun. I was able to smile at them and say thank you. And so that was in a way cool. But yeah, now there's one race left, and thankfully that it's the last one, because I feel like it would have also been good to just call it a season after that and then just enjoy the achievement and take a deep breath, as you said, because I feel like this hasn't really happened yet.
It seems like it's just a massive whirlwind, regardless of what racing you do post becoming a world champion, because you do have all that additional media interest plus all of your sponsor commitments. But then to actually throw the T100 race in on top of it, and another race on top of that again now coming up very soon, it must take its toll a little bit. You mentioned there about the mental fatigue. How did you reset, I suppose, from being crowned the world champion to get ready to race the T100, even though it sounds like you didn't put yourself under too much pressure, that you actually may have enjoyed it, even though it wasn't your best day out?
Absolutely. So I think what I did quite good with my team this year, that we set priorities. So my number one goal was to have my best performance and be in peak shape for Nice, because I really wanted to take on the opportunity to win the Ironman World Championships. And I think this really paid off. So all the other racing that I did was kind of a lead up to Nice. And I just had a funny talk with Philipp, my husband and coach, where we were like, okay, actually, even though winning Nice was our big goal and we really went all in for that, we had no plan what will happen, like what we do if we achieve it. So I wouldn't say it came by surprise, because we really thought that I could do it. But then we were quite overwhelmed by actually achieving it and what it did to us, to be honest. And it's still like we look at each other quite often and realize like we actually did this and we are so proud of it. So I think all the racing that has been before and that comes afterward, nice, because I love to race. This is definitely a big motivation, to train, and gives you purpose, I feel like, in the everyday training and in the pursuit of becoming better. And that was also my main goal for racing T100, because, you face 20 of the best athletes at every race. And this is nothing I was able to do in the past. Usually we only had the Ironman 70.3 and Ironman World Championships as the biggest races, where you feel like all the pressure and the nerves, and you get to test yourself, especially for myself, being a weaker swimmer. Like in the swim, there are dynamics happening and like the mass start and so many things that you only had the chance to do like one or twice a year. And that can also be quite overwhelming, and you don't have much time to practice, to be honest. So I think T100 is a great opportunity to just practice, and for example, in Las Vegas, I was last out of the water. This is nothing I want to experience again, but the level has just gone up. And with all the short course athletes coming in, there is no room for mistakes or weaknesses. And this is just a great challenge. And I really love like the saying of that it's super important to have the guts to fail. It's so important to show up and to be brave and to get out of your comfort zone. And that was what it was all about for me. And it continues to be like this. So also Dubai, the grand final, I know there are athletes that are focusing on that race like 100%, and it will be super tough to beat them, especially with having peaked in Nice with Ironman fitness, which is definitely something very different to short course or T100 fitness. You learn with every race. And I feel like, you can't win every time. And I'm very realistic about that. But I still feel like, for personal growth and also growing as an athlete, this is actually like perfect. So I'm just curious to see if I was able to put in a little bit more work over the last weeks, because I have done some training like more frequently. And I also try to heat prep a little bit because Dubai will be pretty hot. So I still feel like I have a good race within me. And then I'm really looking forward to take a break, because I think that's super important to then, set new goals for next year, and also for your fitness, to let go the fitness, let your body recover, let your, your mental strength come back, and then be ready for next season.
Indeed. And you mentioned there about your success as an athlete, but prior to taking the Ironman World Championship win in Nice, you've so much success. You're a multiple Ironman and Ironman 70.3 winner, Ironman European Champion, Ironman Africa Champion, podiums at Ironman and Ironman 70.3 World Championship, to name just a few. Could you ever have imagined when you took up triathlon that you would achieve so much success in a sport that was never on your radar? You weren't a swimmer, you weren't a cyclist, you weren't a runner, and here you are an Ironman World Champion.
Yeah, that's really crazy. And it's great that you just say it to me again, because, you have to constantly repeat it for yourself, because it's unbelievable, to be honest. When I did my first triathlon, it was like just challenging myself out of my comfort zone by trying something new. And I would have never thought that first this would become a profession for me, that I would become a professional athlete, make my living out of a sport, and then to be so successful. And I hope it inspires other people, to see that it's never too late to try something new firsthand, to really challenge yourself and enjoy learning something new. Even though swimming is still my weakest discipline, I think I managed to still be at a level where I am competitive and I can become world champion. So yeah, I'm really thankful for everything that I have achieved already. And the cool thing is, having had that success, I think it was a very slow progress that I had. Like I took it step by step, year by year. So because it was never like my big goal or dream to become Ironman World Champion, I just thought, okay, let's take on this journey and see how far I can actually come. And I think all the races I did and the victories I had, they were all like small pieces to also a puzzle that I was actually starting to see that I'm competitive or I could be world class. And then until the point, for example, last year, like stepping up to the podium in Kona, to like a race, that is so iconic, so brutal, that really, I think was like a kind of a milestone for me mentally, because I think if you achieve something like this, if you're on the podium, it's not so far till the top step. And I think the physical performance is one thing, but maybe even more important, especially in world championship racing, it comes down to who wants it most, or who can, push themselves the most. And yeah, I think that was definitely like an important experience last year that really made me stronger and made my belief and also at the end the desire to become world champion even bigger.
So there's two key things you mentioned there, which is your own self-belief and then the desire to win. So when you were training throughout the year for this one big goal of 2024, and it was a session you didn't want to do, or it was a horrible session Philip set you and you wanted to just tell him to like leave the room, I'm not doing this training. Is that what motivated you then on those dark days when training is hard? Being a professional athlete is not easy. I mean, you could choose any other job in the world. It's got huge rewards, but it's a tough path to be on. So was it your self-belief and your desire to be on the top step of the podium that kept you motivated during those, I'm going to call them dark days, but I'm sure they weren't dark?
Yeah, 100%. I think I mentioned that earlier already, that like setting a goal is like so important for me to have the motivation to train 3 times a day, and most of the times, like the third session, you're already tired. And I know in the lead up, I had a few days that were, doing multiple interval sessions, for example. So at the end of the day, it's mental, you need to convince yourself that it's worth getting up again and getting that session done. And of course, like the feeling afterwards is great. I think we all know that, like if you've overcome just something difficult, it feels great. And having this goal and dream in your mind really helped me to get everything done. But at the end, I think I just love to train. And most of the time, I actually think Philip is too nice with me. I think the training could be a bit harder here and there. But at the end, I think I really need him to sometimes slow me down, because I think especially female athletes, we tend to be super ambitious and maybe overdo it here and there. And also something I've learned from the past, that it's easy to overdo it in triathlon, especially. And also as a female athlete, to be on top of your fueling and, to keep your cycle in track, just listening to those health signs. And this is something that is like super important for me. I want to show the world that you can be a super healthy female athlete and be world class. And there's nothing you have to sacrifice or become too skinny or whatever to achieve something, especially for a race like Nice, where it's tempting maybe with all these meters of elevations that people might think, oh, you need to be super light or super skinny to be good in this race. And I think in triathlon, we have so many great female athletes that actually show that it's so important to be healthy and strong, and that is fast, and happy is fast. And so I think like most of my training time, to be honest, I have a good time. Of course, there are a few days that are really tough. And I think as a professional athlete, like there is a certain percentage of your training that is super tough. Otherwise, you won't become like a world class athlete. But I think it's also super important that like maybe it's even more than 90% of what I'm doing, I actually enjoy to do it. And it's not so hard for me to get out and get going, because it's actually something I see as a privilege that I'm able to call this my job, to be able to spend so much time outside in nature, and also to invest so much time in myself, in my body, in self-optimization. This is, I think, something that we all, as pro athletes, always have to remind ourselves that it's a big privilege to be able to do that.
I 100% agree. And also that piece around being strong and healthy and fit. You mentioned there about training with your cycle. It was something I wanted to talk about later in the podcast. We've gone completely down different routes of where I thought we would go for the show, but this is what it's about. So let's jump right in. I saw in some articles that have been written about you that you had this incredible race in Dubai where you set it the fastest time for a female over the Ironman 70.3, then stepping up in distance and going long, taking on Ironman Barcelona. In your very first Ironman, you set a best time for a female on debut at the distance, and you set a new course best time. It was mentioned in those articles that your performance correlated to the time of your cycle. Talk to us a little bit about how you've, I suppose, adjusted your training to tie in with your menstrual cycle.
Yeah, so to be honest, back in 2018, I was not aware of the connection between my performance and my menstrual cycle. Back then, the menstrual cycle was something that I didn't really pay much attention to. Like it was happening, and I was more often annoyed by having my period and having cramps and feeling crappy. but I never really saw a connection to my performance or my training. And I also didn't see it as a benefit, you know. I was more like probably most women where we're like, oh, this is a disadvantage and so on and so on. And then I think it was during actually the Corona phase where we didn't have much racing going on, but of course we trained, and because we didn't really know when we will have our next race. So all athletes, I think, tried to stay fit, but it also gave us a lot of time to try out things. And I actually used the time to educate myself further in different topics. I'm a physiotherapist and I'm super interested in, you know, the human body and physiology of our body. And looking back, I often noticed that I had days where I didn't really feel good in training, but I had no real answer to it. And I also remember having big discussions with Philipp during training sessions where all of a sudden I felt like I couldn't run a certain pace anymore, or it just felt awful. And I asked him, what's wrong with me? And he didn't have an answer to it as well. So it was just like weird things. And it was tough sometimes, you know, to feel like you're completely off. And then 1 week later, you're feeling great again. So at some point, I saw a connection to my hormones. And then I also actually, you know, because I always put into a calendar when I had my period, and I kind of tracked my cycle a little bit, but it was more because I had in the back of my mind that it's important for bone density and so on to have a cycle. And I wasn't on like birth control or anything. So I knew like having a natural cycle is like a sign of health. This is something I knew, but I actually looked back in my training and also actually at my races and the performances. And then I actually started to notice a few things, like, for example, the 2018 Barcelona performance that you mentioned, my first Ironman, the fastest debut time, an 8:34 back then. I ran a 2:50 marathon. It was in the first half of my cycle, right? Okay, so this was like a first thing where I like, oh, okay, I did pretty good in this race. I felt really good. Interesting. And so I just did some research on my own data, and I really saw like the connection between my cycle. And of course, I really got hooked, like, and I used the Corona phase to then start tracking my cycle more intense, you know, tracking my temperature every morning, and then also starting to try out things with Philipp in my training. You know, we really started to emphasize like the first half of my cycle until ovulation to train really hard, because that's usually the time where I feel like super strong, like physically, but also mentally. I really have like this, yeah, today I want to go for it mentality. I want to push every interval, and I really want to do intervals, you know. And then as in the second half, I definitely feel more fatigue. I feel like recovery is harder, and just hard sessions get harder. And I think, tried to balance my training for several months, and I started to notice like big changes, you know, in my mood, in actually also like my recovery, in my performance. Like everything started to become better because I felt like I was working with my body and not against it. And of course, I can't choose the timing of the races. And this is definitely something that's sometimes tough to take. For example, especially with all the knowledge that I now have with that the core temperature rises in the second half, like after ovulation, right? And especially for hot races like Kona, this is definitely a disadvantage if you're racing in the second half of your cycle, especially like super close to the period, where I often feel like bloated, tired, and I don't really want to go out. So of course it's tough if your biggest and most important race like falls on that day. This is something I had to face last year at Kona. So I really tried to, you know, give myself a pep talk. I know I can perform on any day, because this is also something I've noticed. We don't need to be afraid that we won't be able to perform. Something I noticed during all my own self-experiments is that I can perform. It will just feel different. I will have to maybe mentally and also physically work a bit harder for achieving the same thing. And if I can listen to my body in training, I will probably skip a session or just do easy training. But if it's a race, I will try my best. But I will also accept if my body tells me like, okay, there, you can't push any further. But then, of course, it's also those times where the race falls into the perfect place. And after having had the experience in Kona, where it was super tough to handle the heat, especially, I told myself like, okay, if at one day, the world champs fall into the first half of my cycle, I will see this like as a sign of the universe telling me, girl, this is your day. You need to go for it. And this is actually what happened in Nice.
No way.
Yeah, in the beginning of race week, I got my period and I was like, oh my God, this is the universe sending me a sign. I mean, of course, you can do the calculations on your cycle, but to be honest, as a professional athlete, with the training I do, with the traveling, with jet lag and so on, it's not that my cycle is always 28 days. So there will be days where it's like 30 and one is like 32. It's not like I can put it down on the day when I will be expecting my period. You can really mess up your cycle with like too much training and just too much stress. And like training is stress for the body, but also there are other stressors, of course. This is also something I had to learn, in order to be balanced, hormonally balanced, you need to find a way to manage stress. And as an athlete, it's tough because your training is already stress. But there are other stressors that you can maybe try to get rid of. Something could be in cosmetics, like I stopped using like regular cosmetic. I went to only using natural cosmetics, for example, because there's sometimes hormonal disruptors in creams or just shampoos or whatever, So there you can really do a deep dive into this topic. It's like super interesting. And I think every woman, but also men, they're also having hormones and they can get into trouble. It's just, it takes longer for them to notice, This is something I noticed for myself, that the monthly cycle is a gift because it's a monthly health checkup we women get. And if everything is in good balance and we're healthy, we are not having cramps, we are not feeling off. I actually came to the point where I was surprised by getting my period. I had no signs beforehand that I always had, feeling bad, because I was treating my body so well. I was fueling well, I was training well. And then I just got my period and I had no cramps and no pain. And it was like kind of unreal, because we expect to have like pain, for example. So it taught me that if I look after myself really good, my body will respond and I will be balanced and therefore more happy, to be honest. Like you feel better, like your hormones, they're also responsible for the way you feel. It's not only about performance. Of course, as an athlete, you appreciate when your hormones also boost your performance. But at the end, it's about being a healthy human and a healthy woman and being happy. And obviously, I was very happy at the beginning of the race week. And yeah, once the bleeding stopped and I was feeling great. And yeah, I definitely reminded myself during the race, you told yourself, like, if this comes down to the first half of your cycle, you have to go for it. So today's the day.
And what a day it was. And now there's so much information that people listening to the show will get from what you've just said. I'm sure there are lots of people who are in tune with their menstrual cycle, but then there's also lots of other people who maybe just don't understand a menstrual cycle and how that can impact everything from training, recovery, sleep. The most important thing you said there is knowing your body and listening to it. And that is the key thing. And you want to have a healthy body and a healthy mind. And a lot of our hormones control how we feel, whether we wake up in the morning and we want to go training, whether we feel bloated after eating or not. Hormones have an intrinsic role to play in every part of our daily life. So by not being in tune with our body, how can we know what training to do, what recovery to do, how we're feeling? Should we do the session? Shouldn't we do the session? There's so much there. So thank you for sharing all of your insight there. And I'm sure lots of our listeners will take a lot from it. If we move slightly away from the changes that you made with regards to your menstrual cycle, But also, the other big thing about you, Laura, is that you're a vegetarian. There's a lot of athletes that would have a lot of interest in succeeding on a vegetarian diet, but a lot of people are afraid to do that. So, if you were to pick a couple of pieces of advice for athletes who wanted to maybe dabble in becoming vegetarian or vegan, indeed, what would you say to them?
So I think we really need to make a difference between being vegan and vegetarian. So I definitely also try to live vegan, but I have come to the point that with doing what I'm doing right now, like a lot of training and trying to be as good as I can, I'm not like, I don't want to say it's not possible in a vegan way. I'm sure it is. And I think we have many examples of athletes that, are great athletes, are healthy and live vegan. But when I tried it, I definitely came to the point where I really missed out on some of my recovery. I felt like, all the plant-based protein supplements, for example, like powder, they were hard on my digestion. And I felt like, I was craving cheese, for example, or sometimes like yogurt. Like there were a few things that I really craved and I was starting to think of them all the time. And I always feel like this is a strong signal of your body telling you actually, this is something you might need, or also including eggs. So I think it's important to say that I'm a vegetarian. I eat eggs, I eat cheese, and I like also something like Greek yogurt, for example, a great source of protein. And, animal protein is simply working a little bit faster, or is available for your body to use it a bit faster than plant-based protein, for example. And so I started to be a vegetarian from a very young age. So my parents, they offered me everything, but it started super early that I tried every meat and I tried fish, but I kind of started to refuse it as a little one, I think like with 3 years old. And then as I grew up, there were the reasons why I didn't want to eat meat, they just added up. So at the end, I'm a big animal lover and I just want to have them alive and happy. And I see them as, creatures that, I just don't want to eat. And I also don't want them to suffer for, just eating their meat. So I think it's important to mention that I'm not feeling that I'm sacrificing anything. So I'm not missing eating meat, for example. So I think that makes it easy for me to live a vegetarian life or eat vegetarian without thinking of like, oh, I would love to have this, but I'm now forcing myself to do this. So for me, it's just the best way like this. But as I said, I do include animal products, but I always try to make sure, to buy the best quality available. So organic milk, organic cheese, organic eggs. And this is definitely maybe the point where I spend most of my money is for buying like good quality food, because I'm a big believer that, you are what you eat. So it's super important to be aware what you eat and what you put into your body. And this is what I pay a lot of attention to. Like I, of course, try to eat healthy, but I also love cake, for example. I'm sure many people know that I have this faster with cake slogan, where I also just want to show in a funny way, that I don't think you have to sacrifice anything, and also eating sweets or treating yourself. I think is so important to be happy and to live balanced, because I think if you forbid yourself to eat any sweets, for example, because you feel like I'm preparing for the World Championships and I want to go all in and no cake allowed, I think for me, this would not work. I would think about cake like 24/7. And then at the end, I would probably, end up eating, 3 cakes. So by just, living a balanced diet without forbidding myself anything and actually believing that it makes me better because I'm happy. And I think especially when it comes down to food, you should be able to enjoy what you eat. It's not only about performance or fueling the body. It's also fueling like the soul, and there's a social aspect, and it's also so cool to cook. Like this is something I really enjoy, and something I'm super thankful to my parents that they showed me growing up, that food is something great. And they showed me how to cook like healthy, but also, to have a healthy connection, I think, with food. And I would never weigh my food, for example. I don't count calories. I think your body, if you listen to your body tells you what it needs and how much you need. And I don't think, as triathletes especially, we tend to overcomplicate things, and we think it's important to to track everything and to do everything. But I think, we have the tools inside of our body as well, and we just need to reconnect maybe here and there.
We need to live a little when we can as well.
For sure. I think that's super important. Yeah. Also, as an athlete, especially as a pro athlete, to have a long career. And I mean, I'm also not the youngest anymore. I think the more, if you're able to really find a way that's sustainable. And I think that's so important, especially when it comes down to also, your diet, that it needs to be sustainable. And every hardcore sacrificing diet is not sustainable. So you need to find a way where you can enjoy your life, fuel your body well. And, if you're constantly thinking about meat, maybe this is also your body telling you that you're lacking some micronutrients. And this maybe also brings us to a challenge where probably some people are afraid of living a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, that they read or hear, that it's so tough to get all the micronutrients in, for example. And I do supplement here and there, and I do regularly track my blood levels. I check my iron, especially before I will do a high altitude training camp, for example, because I'm aware that, especially as a female athlete, with, having a period regularly, training a lot, having a lot of high altitude exposure, this is quite a tough ask for the iron storage in the body, for example. And especially with iron coming from plants, it's harder for your body to absorb it. So I'm eating eggs. I know there's some iron in there, for example, but this is still something, I track. And if it's too low, I would supplement. And especially before high altitude training block, I would start using iron supplementation, for example. But other than that, I don't think there's anything that I really need to supplement. I take my AG1 regularly, where you have this one scoop and you have quite a lot of vitamin enzymes and stuff available. But I'm also not overdoing it with this. I think as long as you eat a lot of variation, and this is what your body needs. And then if you're feeling a bit off or too tired, or you're just afraid that you're missing out, do some blood tests and you will see if your diet works or not.
I think we all need to take a leaf out of your book, Train Smart, Have Fun, Kick Ass.
Yes.
So what piece of cake are you planning on having today, or have you already had some cake today?
To be honest, I already had two. So I had one that was really delicious. I didn't make it myself. I bought it. Okay. It was pumpkin spice cake. Right now it's like this autumn and Halloween. So it was pumpkin, but it was really great. And then it was a cinnamon bun. So I don't know. I think this counts as cake, right? Like a cinnamon bun.
It's still a treat. It was baked, wasn't it? It had to go into the oven.
It was baked. It was delicious.
Yeah. Technically, is it a cake if it didn't go in the oven?
It did go in the oven. So both of them. Yeah. I would also. It's not a piece, but it's a bun. I love buns. So what about you?
I didn't have any cake yet today. My favorite cake is probably chocolate cake, or like a sticky toffee pudding. I do quite like banoffee pie. If I didn't have such a sweet tooth, I probably would be a professional athlete. Give away my athletic performance.
But now I'm the living example that you can do both.
You can do both. I'm going to switch up the gears a little bit and ask you a couple of other random questions. So what were you like growing up? Were you interested in sport, or were you more focused on schoolwork?
Well, that's tough, because I would not say any of both. My parents, they weren't in any sport. So I did, they always took me out and we climbed on trees, and of course, I learned how to cycle a bike, and we did some trips and stuff like that. But I didn't do any specific sport. Unfortunately, also no swimming. But I was also not super intense in the schoolwork. I picked that up towards the end. Like, I think I realized, okay, it's important to get your head down and you want to finish school with a good result. But yeah, I think it was just a good balance, of being a happy and free child, but also going to school. But I didn't took any of both like too seriously.
And then when you look at your life in sport now, it's a really demanding schedule, even though you try to get everything in balance. You mentioned there you enjoy cooking and being in the kitchen and having the opportunity to create your own meals. What else do you do to relax and unwind? If we weren't doing this podcast this afternoon, what would you be doing to chill out?
Yeah, so the funny thing when you ask a professional triathlete about their hobbies is, there's not so much time to do anything else than swim, bike, run. If you're a professional athlete, that takes so much time already from your daily life. So at the end, when I have some spare time and I'm not recording a podcast with you, it comes basically down to just doing normal people things, like lying on the couch watching some TV, or I really enjoy taking my dog Nino on like longer walks, or just, spend some time with him and give him some cuddles and just stuff that comes short normally, or just spend times with friends and family, play a card game or read a book. I often try to squeeze those things in between the training days or the sessions. And if I have an easy day, I just enjoy to extend those things a little bit. Yeah. And also just, show my brain that there are the other things as well besides triathlon.
You get to travel as a professional athlete. You get to travel to lots of wonderful places. Is there anywhere in the world that's like your happy place, that if you could go there today, that you'd be just so content with everything? Maybe it's home. Maybe that's where it is for you. But, there's some people that say like, oh, I want to go to Hawaii and lie on a beach.
Yeah. So honestly, because we travel so much, it's a real luxury for me to be at home and also be in my own kitchen and being able to cook for myself and just enjoy where I live, because it's beautiful here and I don't get to train on my hometown streets very often. So I really enjoy that. But I also have a deep connection and desire to go to Mallorca, for example. I love Mallorca, and I think especially with the weather being cold and gray skies right now, if I could beam myself somewhere, it would probably be Mallorca.
Yeah, that's a good spot, isn't it? I do love Mallorca. And you've raced Ironman 70.3 Mallorca and you've won it.
Yes, and yesterday I looked up the racing schedule for next year, like the Ironman racing schedule, and I saw with deep sadness that Ironman 70.3 Mallorca is not on the pro schedule anymore. That's so sad. Yeah. So no pro race. Oh, they had that in the past for a few years. And then I was so happy when I saw it back on the schedule. And then especially like this year, that was even better. But yeah, they mix up the schedule, and that's definitely sad.
It was such a good race.
It's one of the coolest, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. I've done it a couple of times now, and obviously went back to do it again this year. So hopefully it's back on the pro race schedule for you guys again in the future. But it is an absolutely brilliant race. Continuing our theme of talking about training and racing, what's a piece of advice that you received early on in your sporting career that has stuck with you?
Maybe to really be patient and to take one step at a time, and not to chase fast success. Or I think I started triathlon 2013 around, and I had this slow progression, and I also tried to become better swim, bike, run before I did my first Ironman, like the long distance. I had many people asking me over the years, hey, when do you do your first Ironman? Because I wasn't the youngest anymore when I started triathlon. I was already 24 when I learned how to swim. So from an age perspective, you could have said like, yeah, you can do an Ironman like when you're, 25, 26. People, you can see it now, like they're getting younger and younger. But I think I'm super lucky that I early on had Philipp at my side, giving me guidance that first we need to develop your technique, show your body slowly how to increase distance, and especially focus on speed before you go long. And I think this is something that really stuck into my head. It's always harder to go fast than to go long. So it's definitely worth taking some time to develop technique, speed, do shorter distances, and then go long. Go long with a bang. That was also always my goal. There had been Sebastian Kienle in Germany. And he, I think, also did the first debut sub 8 hours back then. And I always felt like, oh, this is really cool. Like if you do your first long distance race and it's straight away like a good one. And I always had this like dream that if I go long, I just don't want to complete it. I want to do it good. And I think that really paid off.
Doing Barcelona with a bang. There we go. There's a tagline for your race in Barcelona, your debut Ironman. Speaking of Philipp, how do you manage the coach, husband, wife relationship? Because I'm sure it probably gets a bit heated inside and outside of the kitchen, because I'm sure Philipp loves being in the kitchen as well, cooking and prepping food for Laura. But how do you manage that? Because that's quite intriguing for people from the outside looking in to see, gosh, they're like in each other's pockets. He's telling her what to do. She's pushing back, maybe saying, no, I want to do more. So how do you get around all of that? So when you come home and the day of work is done, that it's just Philipp and Laura.
Yeah, that's definitely demanding sometimes. And I have a lot of couples, who tell me like, how do you guys do it? Like I could never listen to my husband tell me what to do or vice versa. And honestly, because I don't know it differently, like he has been the first person, to work with me on my athletics and my training. Like he was my first coach. So I've never experienced working with someone else. Of course, you get insight when you're on camp and you're trained with other athletes. So I'm aware what other coaches are doing, but I've always had like this special relationship. So we were a couple first, I would say, and then he became my coach. I think this is probably also important to mention. So it's always like, he's my partner first and then he's my coach. But at the end, with triathlon, it's not just a sport, it's a lifestyle and it's like 24/7. So we definitely have those times where we have to remind ourselves like, okay, stop talking about triathlon or thinking about triathlon. Let us just have a nice couple evening. But at the end, because we discuss so much and we have those intense moments, I think we really pushed each other and we become better. Like this is a way of becoming better. And I think, with what we have achieved in the sport, and I mean, Philipp, he also started coaching other pro athletes, right? And we also set up our coaching business for age group athletes with Kick-Ass Sports, where we really want to pass on the knowledge. I'm always saying like, I'm the little rabbit, where we tested everything and we just pass on the best of, yeah? And especially for age group athletes, it's so important that their number one priority with their training is actually supporting their health and being happy. So many of the things that are important for me are, in my opinion, even more important for age group athletes. So at the end, I can only say like I think like a big advantage to have him so close. He can look into my eyes every morning and we can make like super short adjustments to my training schedules depending on how I feel, or sometimes he's even annoying me with stuff like he won't tell me the session. We go to the track, for example, and I'm like, Philipp, my brain really wants to know what the set will be. And he's like, yeah, but I want to see you the way you're running first. And if this looks good, like your technique looks good, your body looks like awake, and then I will make the decision on how many reps you will do and how long I will let you run. And even though this is annoying sometimes, like for my brain especially, it shows how, I don't even know the English word for it, but he's like so thoughtful about what he's putting onto my training schedule that obviously I really trust in what he's doing and the advice he's giving me. And I think over the years, we're just become a better team in both ways. but I won't deny there are those intense moments as well.
And then there are intense moments like you coming down the finish line of an Ironman World Championship race and breaking the tape. And so what did it mean to Philipp for you to be crowned the champion?
Yeah, obviously he's so proud. And I know, like, I think he was also overwhelmed because this is so funny because over a whole year, or maybe over the last couple of years, we were having this desire and goal in our mind, like everything we were doing, going to the wind tunnel, doing all the lactate tests and whatever. There's so much you do day in and day out. But then when you actually achieve it, it's like so overwhelming and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do now. So that was funny. And it was also interesting for me to see over the last weeks, that it also took a lot out of him, to support an athlete at this level of racing is super intense for the coach and he is also my closest supporter, for other athletes, this might be only the partner and they have the coach on top. But especially for him being in so many responsible roles, it's super intense. And I really feel like he deserves a big holiday after I finished my last race. And hopefully I can also have the time then to give back to him because he's investing a lot, of course, in my career and in my performance and supporting me day in and day out. And his job kind of never ends. He's looking after my bike. You said he's also sometimes in the kitchen, when he knows I have a long training day, he's supporting me there. But then he's also at Kick-Ass Sports working in the business and he has been working a lot. So he definitely deserves a big break as well.
So maybe a detour to Mallorca on the way home from Dubai.
Yes. But then, Mallorca is so connected to training also.
I know.
Maybe, he loves winter and snow and skiing. So we love to go to the mountains as well. And I might have to go and do some ski mountaineering with him. I think that would be on top of his wish list.
Okay.
That I accompany him there.
No bikes allowed.
No.
No bikes allowed. How did you guys celebrate your success after Nice? Did you go party? What did you do?
So at Nice, we had first celebrations with like all the people that were in Nice, like from my sponsors, family and friends. And then, of course, back home, just with the closest circle. And then actually, when I will come back from Dubai, I'm actually doing a big party. So at the end of November, we will be doing some celebration. And we invited, I think it's over 100 people because we made a list and we put everyone on the list where we felt like they had invested or accompanied me, let's say over the last 10 years, leading up to such a success. Because I'm looking at companies and sponsors that invested in me at a time. I mean, let's say 10 years back, I was starting to have my first sponsors that helped me to become a professional athlete. And those people, they probably never thought that I will become Ironman World Champion. And also for them to see that maybe their early investment actually was one piece of the puzzle of becoming a world champion. I think it's so important to give back and to highlight each and everyone who was believing and supporting me. So I'm really looking forward to that party. And hopefully it will be a great evening, with sharing great memories, telling funny stories. I mean, if I look at pictures from 10 years back, it looks like a lifetime ago. The times, they change so fast, like from the equipment side, but also at the end of the way how I look and so on. So it will be funny and hopefully evening where we really celebrate this big success.
Amazing. And of course, you're so right that it's not just about the past year or the past 2 years. It's actually those people who saw something in you all those years ago and believed in you to take a chance on you. And that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And I think for athletes that are just starting out now as well, for professional athletes, we see a lot of young athletes coming through, like the importance of those initial sponsors as well. And for the sponsors to take a chance on an athlete because you really don't know where they will end up. We got sent in lots of questions from our listeners who are delighted that you're on the podcast with us. Now, some of the questions were quite similar and some of them I've already asked. So I'm going to jump very quickly and just take a couple of the questions that are sent in. So Val's Palsgraph asks, I presume this is in regard to the Ironman World Championship. What would you have done differently and what do you regret doing in the process?
There's nothing I really regret, to be honest. I think we went to Nice super early in the beginning of the year. I think it was in February, to have a first look at the course, to really, get to know the challenge that lies ahead of me. So I then went back home to work, and we really knew what to prepare for. And I think we have done a really good job in preparing. I knew the demands of the course, and I got sick the week before the race. So that is maybe something I would maybe slightly do different. You're always paying so much attention to not getting sick and isolating yourself. And then, I had contact with someone who was sick, and I got also sick. So that could have been, if it would have been like a few days later, then this could have really impacted my race. So that was definitely like a warning shot, but also something at the end, you can't control everything, right? And I felt like everything I could control, I controlled in a good way. And I mean, coming away with the win, I think that's the best sign of that. Yeah, there's not so much you have to regret.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Sense Endurance asks, why does she always seem so genuinely happy, and how does she deal with setbacks? And then also asks if you've ever gone too hard on the licorice before a race.
Yeah, that's someone who knows that I love licorice. This is definitely something I really love. And funny story that Will, he's one of the filmers from the Ironman crew. He actually, I think it was at the press conference, he gifted me a bag from Finland full of licorice. But he was also telling me, like, Laura, don't eat it all before the race. But yeah, I know in theory what can happen if you eat too much licorice. But luckily, I have never tested it before a race. So why am I so happy? I think we talked about a lot of the things why being happy is important to me. And I think by being able to choose my life and what I dedicate my time to, this is what makes me happy. And I think if you can call your profession something that makes you happy, you have made the right decision. And of course, I faced many setbacks over the last years, like during my athletic career, but also besides being a professional athlete, you face setbacks all the time. And I think one important thing is to accept setbacks as part of becoming better. I think many people are afraid of changing something or trying out something new because they're afraid of the setback or that it won't work. And I think I'm very aware that setbacks are part of progress, and I'm striving for progress like all the time, because otherwise the thing that I'm maybe afraid of is standing still and not making progress anymore. I think especially when you're getting older as an athlete and new athletes are coming up, they're always challenging you, and you need to find new ways to challenge yourself to make progress. And I think that is, at the end, it's a fun thing. And I think it's all comes down to your perspective and what you see as a setback or as something that can actually help you. You need to make mistakes in order to find out something new. And if it's an injury setback, for example, it's just, you got to know a new limit, and you can find ways to overcome it and then come back stronger. So I always feel like, it's at the end, it's all about the perspective and dealing with it in the right way.
And of course, look at Patrick Lange, 3-time Ironman World Champion, a really exciting race in Kona. Did you get to watch it?
Of course. And to be honest, it was the first time that when I was back home, the time difference is quite tricky because the run is like at 2-3 a.m. in the morning, and like it's tough. So it was the first time that I actually watched like the whole race. I think it was so exciting. I'm super happy for Patrick. And he's another great example, that nobody really put the money on him. It was really tempting to go vote for Sam, Magnus, Christian, and then he showed the world that even with 38, and I think it was 6 years after his last victory, and also after having had many setbacks this season, you can come back with a bang. And that's what he did. And I think it's a great example of, as long as you don't give up, and in your own world, you still believe, or maybe your team also believes you're capable of a performance like that, then yeah, it's just cool to see.
And nice to have two German athletes at the top of the World Championship this year. That must also be very special.
That is definitely very special. And I'm sure that there will be many events over the winter where I will get to meet Patrick and we will go there together. And yeah, that's really cool. Something I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
One of the questions that came in actually was something Patrick said at the press conference in Kona, was about having the men and women race together again at the Ironman World Championship. You are the women's Ironman World Champion. You won it on a day where it was only women that were racing. In your opinion, would you like to see the men and women racing again, or how would you see that unfolding if that was the case?
So, yeah, I also heard Patrick also saying that he wants to have the women back in the race. And honestly, I think it was a really brave move from Ironman to give the women their own race, and something that I really appreciate, that, still, yeah, at a point in my career where I get to race only women. Like, this is special. I know it's still special, but I hope in the future it won't be special. It will be the new standard, because I think we deserve to have our own race. And if we want to grow a sport, especially bring more women into the sport, you need to give them the full attention and to give them their own race day. I think it was actually nearly in every interview that I read or heard from Patrick where he said something about it. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure if he is aware that by saying that, he is asking us to join the men's race again, to give up our own day, because I think the people on the island of Hawaii made it pretty clear that they don't want to have 2 days of racing. And of course, in Patrick's world, as a man, it won't change anything, right? They will have as women in the race, but their own race won't be impacted. But for us, it will be very different. And most of the media attention will go to the men again. And also the first women won't be the first athlete crossing the line. And I think there are many things that I think it would just be a huge step back. Mm-hmm. And I would highly appreciate to be able to share, the weekend with the men, and to be able to also build the season similar, like that we have the World Championship race at a similar time of the year. I think that was something that didn't feel right, with like Nice and Kona being so widely separated, because I think many athletes, men and women, like to train together and so on. And it just makes it harder also for couples on the age group side and so on. But I really hope that the women, or I'm also open to discuss, to find new ways to make it happen. I'm also really excited to see the direction that Ironman will take on, because of course I'm aware that probably at the moment, from a financial aspect, they're losing money by doing this. But I still believe, it's with many things, when you do a startup, at the beginning, you might be losing money, but hopefully it will be worth it. And I hope they will continue. And I hope we will find maybe new locations where it's possible. I think, as much as I love Kona, and I think, the shots are epic and so on, from a professional perspective, I think it's super cool to have changing locations. To prepare for Nice, for example, was really, something I was looking forward to, because it was so fresh and new. And in Kona, I raced 3 times already. I feel like I know every stone. And, of course, it's a big challenge to do well there, but it's also really exciting to have new courses. So this, in my opinion, would also be cool to just have like a rotating World Championship.
Yeah, a bit like we do with the Ironman 70.3, where it changes every year. Obviously a little bit harder, because the Ironman is such a big monster of an event by comparison to an Ironman 70.3 from a logistical perspective. But yeah, some very valid points there. And I suppose the key point there, Laura, is one, the women need to have their own day. They deserve to have their own day and not just be an add-on to the men's race. But also, you talked earlier about having the courage to step up and be willing to fail. So Ironman stepped up. They've given our amazing female athletes their own day, and long may that continue. And quickly, just speaking of Kona, will you go to Kona next year? Do you think, is that on the plan?
Well, honestly, like watching the men was really motivational, and I haven't made any like specific race plan or goal setting for next year because I think this is something Philip and I will do, after we had our break, or maybe, while we are on our holiday, that gives us time to reflect, but also look ahead. But of course, I mean, it's a great challenge, and of course, something, I still have in the back of my mind that it would be amazing to trying to, have like a really great performance in Kona as well. So to be honest, I already feel like the motivation is there, but still it's too early to really say, yeah, I will do it. But I'm sure, I mean, I'm definitely already feeling it.
Feeling the Hawaiian vibes already.
Yes.
So 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. So one is, what's one thing about you that might surprise people or that few people know about you?
So I guess probably no one knows that I actually love fast cars. I don't have one. Fast cars like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. This is something I think is really cool. But then I'm always having this environmental guilt inside where I feel like it makes no sense to drive a car like this. But I think they're pretty cool. And if they wouldn't have the bad environmental impact, I would probably love to have one.
Well, maybe you'll get to ride one in Dubai, because aren't there like a plethora of all
Maybe
of these
an
fancy
electronic
cars?
version.
Yeah. And then finally, of all of your successes to date in sport and in life, what are you most proud of? Can be anything.
Well, I mean, the Ironman World Championship title is probably just on top of that. But it's also like having had the courage to just jumping in the pool and trying to learn how to swim was probably, the seed of, getting there. And I think, I'm actually proud that I'm just always curious to try new things and that I really don't limit myself by believing something has to be in a certain way. And I think, hopefully I can keep that. And then I think I can have a long career. And even if I don't want to be a professional athlete anymore, I think I can use all this curiosity and passion to, step into, for example, the kick-ass sports coaching business.
Brilliant. Well, Laura Philipp, Ironman World Champion 2024. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been a long road to get here, but I am so glad that it took us until now. And what a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Vielen Dank, and the best of luck with your T100 race and your off-season break.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. If you would like to hear more great episodes of the podcast, be sure to check them out on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow all of our activities and podcasts on Facebook, X, LinkedIn and Instagram. And if you have any feedback or guest suggestions, please feel free to email me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for listening. Stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.